threat modeling. This is a structured approach toward network security that assesses the potential threat landscape concerning the point of view of an attacker. This takes into consideration the attacker's motives, threat profile, their capability and skill, key assets of interest, and the most likely attack vector to be used, among other attributes, to understand which threats are most likely to materialize and how they will unfold in the environment. The idea behind this is to understand the environment better by reviewing all the components and processes. Today, most threat modeling methodologies focus on one of the following approaches: asset-centric, attacker-centric, and software-centric. The following diagram shows what risk inherently means. Risk is when we have an asset that is vulnerable to a certain flaw or loophole, and we have a threat vector that can exploit the vulnerability. Ultimately, this impacts the asset and confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In this diagram, A is asset, T is threat, V is vulnerability, and R is risk. There's steps to explain the threat modeling process. First, the scope of the analysis is defined and each component of the application and its infrastructure is documented. Second, this is followed by developing a data flow diagram that shows how each of these components interacts. This helps us assess the control mechanism. Privileges are verified for the data movement. Third, then potential threats are mapped to these components and their risk impact is quantified. Fourth, and finally, various security mitigation steps are evaluated that might already be in place to mitigate such threats. Here we document the requirements for additional security controls if applicable. On the flip side, an attacker might conduct an exercise similar to the following threat modeling. They would start by evaluating all possible entry points into the network, application, or infrastructure. Second, the next step will be focused on the dataset or assets that would be accessible to them via these access points and then evaluate the value or possibility of using these as a pivot point. Third, post this, the attacker crafts the exploit and executes it. Now that we have a basic understanding of the threats that we may face, it's important to have standardized frameworks that can be referred by the professionals to assess the nature of these threats and the impact they may have. Assessing the nature of threats. You, as a security professional, can use various industrialized risk frameworks and methodologies to assess and quantify the nature of threats. Some of the prominent ones will be discussed in next lectures. STRIDE. STRIDE is a security framework that classifies security threats into 6 categories. Spoofing of user identity, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege. This was developed by Microsoft to verify security concepts, such as authenticity, integrity, known repeatability, confidentiality, availability, and authorization. PASTA, Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis, PASTA. PASTA is a risk-centric approach focused on identifying potential threat patterns. This is integrated application threat analysis that focuses on an attacker-centric view that security analysts can leverage to develop an asset-centric defense strategy. It has 7 stages that build up to the impact of a threat. These stages are definition of the objectives for the treatment of risks, definition of technical scope, application decomposition and assertion, threat analysis, weakness and vulnerability analysis, attack modeling and simulation, risk analysis and management. Next, we will take a look at the TRIC framework and see how it's used for security auditing for risk management. TRIC is a framework for security auditing from a risk management outlook perspective. The process starts with defining the requirement model that the threat models are based on. The requirement model outlines the acceptable level of risk which is associated with each asset class. The matrix is further broken down into actions such as creating, reading, updating, and deleting, along with associated privileges such as allowed, restricted, and conditional. By following this, possible threats are specified, mapped alongside the risk value, which is based on a 5-point scale for each action based on its probability. VAST: Visual, Agile, and Simple Threat Modeling. VAST is an agile software development methodology with a focus on scaling the process across infrastructure and SDLC. VAST aims to provide actionable outputs for various stakeholders, and the scalability and usability is a key factor for its adaptability in larger organizations. This diagram illustrates a VAST model. VAST utilizes two threat models: the application threat model and operational threat model. The application threat model uses process flow diagrams to represent the architectural viewpoint, whereas the operational threat model uses data flow diagrams to represent the attacker's viewpoint. OCTAV: Operationally Critical Threat, Asset, and Vulnerability Evaluation. OCTAV is a security framework that utilized for assessing risk levels and planning countermeasures against them. The focus is to reduce risk exposure to potential threats and determine the likelihood of an attack and its impact. It has three broad stages, and these are: building asset-based threat profiles, classification of infrastructure vulnerabilities, creation of an overall security strategy and activity plan for the successive exercises. It has two known formats: OCTAV S, which is simplified format suitable for smaller organizations, and OCTAV Allegro, which is a more comprehensive format suitable for large organizations. In this section, we have taken a look at the foundational network security concepts and components that form the strong base that's required for a secure network implementation. After this, we took a step-by-step dive into various phases of building network security, which are planning and analysis, designing, building, testing, and deployment. In the second half of the section, we have looked at an optimal NOC setup and its various attributes, such as incident management, monitoring, escalation, and reporting. Lastly, we dug into network security assessments and discussed threat modeling. By completing this section, you now understand that network security is a vast domain that requires a bottom-up approach if we wish to fully understand the minute mechanisms that make it tick. As a security professional, you must have a good exposure to the fundamentals of network and the models and frameworks explained in this section, while at the same time be able to identify remediate deep-seated technical issues. I highly recommend doing a foundational assessment of the network configuration and reviewing policies and procedures in place in order to incorporate security from the inside out.